I went to a serial killer's lair. Hello, Redditors. Here is a story I have never told anyone, partly because elements of the story are just not appropriate in most social situations. As a result, I've locked this away in my memory, and I rarely think about it. Fair warning, this story does involve some sketchy sexual situations, but does not describe any actual sexual acts. And as another disclaimer, I am completely aware that this story involves me being very stupid and careless. I'm not going to inject these acknowledgments into the story, but rest assured that in hindsight, I am aware of the foolishness that took place, and I don't need to be chided on that topic. Now, where to begin? The year was approximately 1998-1999. I was a young gay man in my early 20s, living in a medium-sized city in the Midwestern U.S. This was sort of an in-between transitional time for gay people, where in most populous areas we had enough respect to live openly, but there were still plenty of people who did not like us. It was well before the invention of smartphones, and the internet was still in the early stages of mass adoption. There were large communities online, but it was not yet at the point where most Americans were online. Online socialization consisted of chat rooms, hosted by various services like AOL, Yahoo, or IRC servers, and message boards were still in use by large numbers of people. For gay men at that time, it was nothing short of revolutionary. Prior to the internet, and to the broader cultural changes, gay men had been stuck looking for fun in secretive or shady places due to the inability to freely express ourselves. In the 90s, it was still somewhat risky, but the internet offered a way to talk freely and relatively anonymously without the risk of being outed or worse. For this reason, it really took off in the gay communities, and gay men were a very large part of the user bases for these social platforms. It was suddenly very easy and relatively safe to find dates, friends, or just sex, and it quickly became the norm for a lot of gay men. On the other hand, being such a new communication tool for most people, we were sometimes blind to the risks. Being an attractive young man in my prime, I made liberal use of online communities to find dates. That is to say, I had plenty of hookups. My city had a decent number of chat rooms and personals message boards, and I had mostly great experiences. I met the typical assortment of good guys, closet cases, and weirdos that you'd expect. I wasn't an absolute hoe by most standards, but suffice to say that a cute gay at that time could generally have a lot more dates than your typical straight person, LOL. At some point during this time, I'd had some brief chat on a message board with a guy from my city. I forget his screen name. It's been over 20 years, so let's call him Slim Guy 65. This back and forth had happened on a general thread in the gay section, not in private messages, so it was visible to anyone who chose to read that thread. Nothing had come of it, but about a week later, I received an email from an unrecognized address. The email basically said, "Hey, I'm not gay, and I don't agree with the gay lifestyle. I'm here because my friend met this Slim Guy 65 person from this message board, and the guy really hurt him. I don't want this to happen to anyone else." My friend tried to tell the police, but they wouldn't do anything. "I see you were talking to Slim Guy 65, so just be careful and stay away from him." Okay, that's strange. What does this person mean by really hurt him? Was his heart broken? Did he get beaten up or verbally abused or what? I responded to the email asking for clarification on what exactly happened. I never received a response. I was slightly weirded out by it, but on the other hand, it's an anonymous email from someone who doesn't respond and is vague about their warning. This could be anything. It could be some disgruntled ex trying to mess with the guy. It could be a real warning about someone gay bashing. It could be someone trolling who doesn't have anything to do with anyone. I kept it in the back of my mind, but pretty much shrugged it off. Several weeks later, I had a weekday off work and decided to take to the internet to fish for some dombrine, as was my custom. Lo and behold, I had an email response to a personal ad. It was Slim Guy 65. He was offering to meet at his place to hang out and just have a good time. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I won't go into details, and as I recall, there weren't really many details discussed other than the small talk and intros we'd done previously. Nothing about this guy was really sounding interesting to me, but I had no other offers on this day, so I decided why not. I'll go see what this dude is about. As I typed my reply, I suddenly remembered the strange email I'd received warning about this person. I went back and reread it. Still vague, still presenting more questions and no answers. Should I take this anonymous warning at face value and just ignore SG65? I decided to go check him out anyway. His address was on a rather busy street in the middle of a dense residential area, not some shack out in the woods, and I can handle myself. If he's weird, I can just fuck out of there. Before long, I arrived at the house at the agreed time. It was a duplex-style house, with one apartment on the ground floor and one on the second floor, part of a row of several identical duplexes. It was the middle of the afternoon. There was plenty of traffic on the street and the occasional person out on their porch or in their backyard. I pulled up the driveway to the parking area behind the house, got out and knocked on the door. The guy that answered was a pretty normal kind of mousy-looking man, probably in his 40s, slight, slim build, soft-spoken, looked like any guy working in an office cubicle somewhere. Not really my type, but honestly, my curiosity was piqued and I had nothing better to do, so I stepped inside to take a look around and gauge the situation, with the warning email fresh in my mind. I stepped into the back door, into the kitchen. It was very clean, and there was nothing out on the counters, and no table and chairs or anything. That is to say, it did not look like someone was living there. It had been kept up and cleaned, but looked empty. Looking out into the apartment, I could see that it was not set up as a living space. A large window with sliding glass was between the kitchen and living room, and I could see what looked like a large table out in the living room area. SG65 said something like, "This isn't where I live. A friend of mine used to run a doctor's office here. I maintain the building for him. It's private, though. We have the place to ourselves." Weird. Okay. He shut the back door and locked it, with a keyed deadbolt. The kind that you need a key to open, even from the inside, and put his keys back in his pocket, saying, "So, what do you want to do?" At this point, my danger sense spiked. This is not a normal home, and why is he locking the door like that? It's not necessarily suspect. A lot of people have that sort of lock on their door, and the door has a window, so it even makes sense. Still, something is not right here, I can tell, and now I'm locked in. I asked him why he was locking the door like that, which immediately flustered him. He was looking rather nervous, and his voice was a little wavery and halting, not quite stuttering, but almost. He said, well, we don't want someone to come in and interrupt us, right?" Flashing a weak, unconvincing smile. His demeanor and body language were all I needed to confirm that this guy was up to no good, or at least there was something he was hiding. However, I could tell that I was intimidating him. I was not a particularly muscular kid, but I have a larger frame. Like, even when I'm at my very thinnest, I will still wear size L tops and 36 waist pants, so I look big, which people tend to interpret as me being stronger than I really am. Also, I'm not a tough guy at all, but I have a resting facial expression that makes me look like a badass thug. People who don't know me often assume that I'm rough or something. I sometimes use this to my advantage while I can, because before long a new acquaintance will eventually figure out that I'm a total wimp, LOL. But this was definitely an occasion to play up the tough guy appearance, and I did exactly that. I put on my best steely face and told him to unlock the door and that I don't want to be locked in here. He looked for a moment like he was going to pee his pants, then he said, "Okay, all right, I'll unlock this." He unlocked the deadbolt, "And I'll just lock the knob here." And he turned the little dial that locks the doorknob. That was fine with me. I continued to stare at him until he said, "I'll leave the keys on the counter right here." And he set his keys down near the sink. I was relatively satisfied with that answer. At this point, though, my adrenaline was flowing. I was almost in full fight-or-flight mode, but I was kind of stuck in place. The guy was between me and the door. I was freaked out, but this little weasel did not appear to pose any immediate physical threat to me. I could tell that his pant pockets were empty, and that I was intimidating the living hell out of him. I didn't know yet exactly what to do. Now keep in mind that despite my wordy descriptions, this all happened very quickly, without any really long pauses. It had only been maybe 1 to 2 minutes since I had stepped in the door. This all happened at the pace of a conversation. Appear so. He said, "Well, let's go in." The guy was obviously nervous and trying not to appear so. He said, "Well, let's go in," and walked a wide path around me through the kitchen into what would normally be the living room, and toward the hall to the right from there. I was familiar with this floor layout. It is very common in this area. The hallway would lead to 2 small bedrooms with a bathroom in between them. I hesitated, thinking I should just walk out that back door and take off. But really, now I was super curious. I knew there's no way in hell I'm doing anything with this guy, but I kinda want to see what's going on in here. Also, I'm confident that he can't take me if it comes to a fight. So I slowly headed toward the living room. It felt like I was walking in slow motion. From the kitchen entrance, I could see a large rectangular stainless steel table taking up a lot of the living room. I remember thinking this looks like a surgical table. It looked like it could rise and tilt, and it had a recessed channel running all the way around the edge. In hindsight, I now know what that was. It was 100% a mortician's table. Dude had a mortician's table in there. But at that time, I thought it looked like a medical table of some sort. There was some other office-type cabinets and stuff around, I think, but now all I really remember is the table in that room. The large front window looking out onto the street was covered by vertical blinds that were closed. SG-65 said something like, "This used to be a doctor's office, like I said. Come on back here." The hallway revealed the room setup that I expected. The first bedroom door was closed. The second door was open to a small, very clean bathroom. At the end of the hall was the other bedroom, which looked like, if the doctor's office story was true, had at one time been converted to an exam room. He said, "We can go in that room if you want. Go ahead, take a look," and he stayed by the other closed bedroom door. The back bedroom door was open, and I could see that the walls were covered in a honey-colored wood paneling, the type you might see in a den or office that hasn't been updated since the early 1970s. I slowly took a few steps down to that door, trying to be very aware of what Mr. Creepy was doing behind me. He didn't move. When I got up to that room, the first thing I noticed was the door had a keyed deadbolt lock, like the back door. This room locked from the outside. I wondered if there was a lever on the inside, but I pretty much knew the answer to that question without needing to check. I also saw a chair. A non-swiveling plastic desk chair with thin metal legs sitting near the center of the room. The room had old dark carpet and those wood-paneled walls. I noticed that the walls were completely paneled with no windows, and I know that room had at least one window, probably 2, so whoever did that paneling went over the windows. There was also a phone in there, plugged in and sitting on the floor. It was an old office phone, probably from around the 80s or early 90s, dingy beige plastic with several buttons to manage different phone lines, just sitting on the carpet near the wall, with the chair at a slight distance facing the phone. There was nothing else in that room. I was standing at the threshold of that room, with one foot slightly in, absolutely not going past that door. I looked back at Dude. He was still standing by that other door, just nervously smiling at me, trying hard to look casual, but obviously very nervous or something. He said something like, "Well, what do you want to do?" Instead of answering, I felt around the back side of the D-bolt lock. Sure enough, nothing there but the smooth wood of the door. It also dawned on me that I did not see a light switch anywhere for the ceiling lamp. Where was the switch? Who knows? It should have been just inside the door, of course, but that original switch was covered up by the paneling. He mumbled something about not having the key to that lock. Don't worry about it. I turned back to face the guy and just said, "What is it that you want to do here?" My skin had gone ice cold as I realized that I was way, way, way too far into this apartment. I was running through my options in my head. What is this guy going to do? He doesn't appear to have any weapon or anything in reach, but who the fuck knows what goes on in this place? What are you trying to do? He was almost totally derailed by that. He stammered out, "Some hot, man-to-man. Fun?" with the weakest smile I've ever seen, looking like he was just a hair's breadth away from panicking. That sounds comical, but really that sentence was probably the most chilling part of the entire experience for me. It was the way he said it. Like he had to come up with something on the fly, something that would sound plausible, and he failed. Who says that in real life? Hey, do you want to have some hot man-to-man fun? Nobody. It's something you'd see on an advertisement for a cheesy porn site or something. Some hot man-to-man. Fun? Quivering lips. That was it. I said, "Nope, I want to go. I'm leaving." He said, okay. I quickly walked past him as he flattened himself against the wall to avoid me, and I noped right out through the living room dissection area and through the kitchen to the back door, which was thankfully still not deadbolted. The keys were still on the counter. I let myself out of the door and didn't bother closing that, as I saw him slowly coming to the door behind me. I deliberately walked, not ran, to my car. Looking back at the building, I could see that indeed there was a window facing the backyard area from that paneled room, but of course it was covered up from the inside. Dude was shutting and locking the back door, and I left, heart pounding, skin icy cold, thinking, holy fuck. What was that? So, was this guy some kind of killer, or was he just an awkward, closeted gay guy, with access to a sterile-looking apartment with an autopsy mortuary table? And a windowless room that locks from the outside, with a chair and a phone and no light switch. It's clear to me that the poor soul who walks into that room gets locked in. He probably shuts off the light from somewhere and calls the phone. Other than that, it's anyone's guess what happens. I assume the friend of the judgmental person who emailed me must have been some kid that got locked in for whatever game ensues. Driving home, at first I thought, of course I have to call the police and tell them what's in that place. But thinking it through, I realized I didn't really have any crime to tell them about. I went to meet a man for casual sex, and what? He has a room with a chair in it? He has, as I thought at the time, an exam table? The police aren't going to do anything with that story. The guy didn't touch me or do anything to me, and I left. I considered calling an anonymous tip line, but again, what exactly would I report? There was no actionable crime. Also keep in mind that at that time, while the local police in this city were pretty decent, they weren't especially interested in getting involved with helping the gays. They'd prosecute actual crimes if it was cut and dry, but I'd heard plenty of accounts of them not choosing to follow up on cases where there was not an easy arrest to be made. I decided not to report anything because nothing would come of it except drawing unwanted attention to myself. Even in retrospect, I think that was probably the most rational choice to make. If this happened today in 2020, the law enforcement would probably be a lot more interested in it. But back then, not so much. So, live and learn. I still drove past that house once in a while in the normal course of life for several years, and I'd pay attention to how it looked. The vertical blinds were closed for maybe 5 or 6 years wherever I went past. Then eventually the blinds were down, and there were decorative curtains in the window, so I assumed the place was eventually sold to someone who actually lived in it. Around 2002, maybe 2003, there was a murder of a young man on the news. He'd been found in the next state, which borders on my city, so it's not very far away. I recognized the guy from the gay community, but didn't know him personally. A friend mentioned to me something about the local serial killer. I said, "What?" He explained that a few young men had gone missing over the past year, each after being at one specific dive bar, and each being found several miles to the north past the state line and out in the country. The case on the news matched up with that M.O. My friend told me the young guy had been at that bar and left with someone the night that he disappeared. The news report didn't mention anything about a gay bar or similar recent cases, of course. I had to wonder if my acquaintance from the internet had anything to do with it. The location of the murders apparently was nowhere near that duplex, at least according to the story I was told. I never heard of a resolution to that murder on the news or any official mention of a suspected serial killer other than some gossip. So, that happened. I work in a 24/7 diner. Last night's customers weren't human. You know how it only takes a few small accidents to make you homeless? An emergency expense here, a couple of overdraft fees there, a rent check that bounced because of the fees, and an eviction notice that happened because of the bounce. I went from stable, albeit not wealthy, to sleeping in my car within 4 weeks, and I count myself lucky. At least I have a car and a job, which is why I have this story. I work the overnight shift at an all-night diner. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't. They never close. They're always hiring, and they don't really care about your background. It was the quiet hours, when the time is so late it's early. The diner was empty, so I was leaning against the counter eating a bowl of chili with shredded cheese and chopped onion while I scrolled for other jobs on my phone. The cook was outside having a smoke, and the only other person in the diner with me was a young pregnant girl named Cherie, who was texting her grandmother nervously. I'm gonna have to leave early. My grandma's telling me I need to come get my child. I hate when she does this, but I can't afford a babysitter either. Cherie was cool, but like everyone else here, she was having a rough time. Her boyfriend was in the prison 60 miles down the road, and part of why she worked here was to fill his accounts and have enough money for regular visits. He was there for murder or something, but we don't really talk about our personal lives, so I wasn't sure. Brucius was the cook, and he took a smoke break at every available opportunity, which, when the restaurant was empty, meant a lot of opportunity. He'd wander back if a customer walked in, but there was no reason to bother him. "Hey, it's not a problem. I'll handle everything. Go pick up your kid." "Thank you. You're a lifesaver. I owe you." "Don't worry about it. I'll see you Wednesday." She ran out the door, and I didn't think anything of it. I heard her say goodbye to Brucius, and then her car engine grind as she drove away. I had another 4 hours left on my shift, and with any luck, it would stay this quiet. Of course, since I'm here talking to you, you know I wasn't so lucky. The door dinged, and a family of 4 walked in: mom, dad, boy, and girl. My eyes flicked to the parking lot. I didn't see a car, but I just told myself they could have parked behind the building. It's funny, but I don't remember what they looked like. However, I do remember what they wore because it was some real Leave It to Beaver Andy Griffith type shit. The dad had on a blue plaid button-up shirt with a white undershirt beneath and khaki trousers. His hair was perfectly slicked back, like one of those old Brill-Cream ads. The mom wore a red gingham check dress with a wide skirt, crinoline, and cinched waist. Her hair, too, was impeccable, straight out of an old Betty Crocker commercial. The little girl had her hair in 2 pigtails anointed with yellow bows and was wearing a pink shirt and blue shorts. The boy had a perfect cowlick and wore a blue shirt and red shorts. I felt unsettled. They looked perfect, but they felt wrong. Brucius came back inside, took one long look at the family as they settled into a booth, then went through the swinging doors into the back without a word. Rude. "Good evening, y'all," I said as I set down the laminated menus. "Can I get you anything to drink?" Each member of the family clasped their hands over their menu and turned in my direction with a smile. "4 glasses of milk, please," said the dad, his tone folksy, like something out of an old sitcom. "Everything looks so delicious," said the mom cheerily, without glancing at the menu. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen adults order milk, especially at such a late hour. "Thank you," the dad said when I set their glasses down. No one had moved 1 centimeter, their posture and faces in the same position as they watched me pour their beverages and return. I wiped my hands on my apron and attempted a smile. "Are you all ready to order?" The 4 of them glanced towards my name tag in unison, and I was suddenly glad most of it was hidden beneath my hoodie. "We're waiting for someone," said the mom in a sing-song voice. They all turned to face either other, small, identical smiles on their faces, condensation from their untouched glasses making 4 tiny puddles. It wasn't right for children to be that quiet, or for anyone to be that still. To be honest, it wasn't normal to wait for someone at that hour either. I pretended to wipe down the counters. Guests weren't supposed to be left alone, and I didn't know what to do. "Are you sure I can't bring you anything?" I asked after a couple distressingly silent minutes. "We told you, we're waiting," one of the children hissed. I startled and dropped the rag. That wasn't a child's voice. All 4 sets of eyes again fixated on me, but this time no one was smiling. My heartbeat rushed in my ears, and I could have sworn they heard it too. "Okay." I laughed nervously, my voice a little too high. Abruptly, out the corner of my eye, I saw Brucius waving frantically behind the swinging doors, gesturing for me to join him in the back. Relieved to have an excuse to leave, I backed away slowly, something deep in my most primal brain telling me not to turn my back to them. Rules be damned, I couldn't be out there alone with them a second longer. I'd barely opened the swinging doors when he jerked me all the way in. "Listen," he whispered urgently. "Make sure it's far enough back that the swinging door won't break the line. It needs to go all the way from one wall to the other. Pour extra if you're not sure." "I'm confused. And I'm scared shitless. Pour." He hefted his own large bag of salt and began making a wide circle, one large enough to fit us both. Looking behind him, I could see there was already a similar salt line at the back, stretching from wall to wall. I had no idea what was happening, but I'd never seen Brucius be anything other than laid back and chill my entire time here. And that was enough to get me to listen. As I poured, I took a peek through the round window in the swinging doors and spotted the family still sitting there. They still hadn't moved. "This is really fucking creepy," I muttered under my breath. Once my line of salt had been poured and double-checked, Brucius pointed to the inside of the circle and pressed a finger to his lips. In the next instant, he'd leapt to join me in the middle of the circle. One heartbeat later, I heard the most ungodly shrieking from the dining area. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. It was like the sound waves were made of broken glass. My skin felt like it was being peeled off. My eardrums screamed. I started to fall over and stopped abruptly only partway down. Brucius had twisted the collar of my shirt around his hand. I'd almost fallen outside the circle. Another shriek rolled over me and I sobbed in confusion and pain. My muscles clenched into knots as I fought an instinctive urge to run. Brucius' grip tightened, keeping me grounded. You'd think it would be too dark to see anything, but there were so many mouths, so many teeth, so many eyes. The space filled with the scent of rot and tar. This was the family. I retched and clamped my hands over my mouth to keep the vomit down. The mass glided and spilled its way up to the very edge of the salt line and stretched horizontally along its entire length. I understood why there was a circle now. If there'd been the slightest gap in the line or between the line and the wall, it'd have slithered its way across. My eyes burned the longer I looked. I felt something warm drop onto my hand. I thought it was tears. It was a nosebleed. As the screams ratcheted higher, Bruce shouted, "Close your eyes!" I clamped my hands over my ears, screwed my eyes shut, and sobbed. Eventually, Brucius was red-eyed and bedraggled. He was using the special broom, the one that said, "Do not use," in Sharpie on the handle to sweep all the salt into a large dustpan with the same directive. The salt had turned a smoky blue and smelled like sulfur and gasoline. Perhaps it was the daylight. Perhaps it was surviving the single most terrifying night of my life. But when I spoke, my voice was surprisingly calm, even though it sounded like I'd chewed and swallowed broken glass. "I'm going to wash my face. Then I'm going to make us coffee. And then you're going to tell me what the hell that was." He nodded, mumbled, "Yeah," and kept sweeping. I was half tempted to turn the sign at the door to closed, but it would just my luck if the manager appeared out of nowhere when I did. Besides, the place was empty. Once he was done sweeping, he washed his hands and joined me. I poured him a mug of the best coffee I've ever tasted in my life. He lit up a cigarette, and we looked at each other across an empty table. Despite the commotion, the diner was in perfect order, like nothing had ever happened. What was that? He took a long drag, as though toying with telling me the truth or not. But after last night, it was too late to lie. They're called the family. I never seen them before, but Carrie, the waitress before you and Cherie, worked here for a few years and said they show up every once in a while. He paused as if expecting me to say something. I took a long sip and he kept on. The first clue was they didn't have a car. They just appeared, I don't even know from where, and walked in. The second is how they were dressed. Where did they come from? I don't know, but the lore is a family disappeared on the highway decades ago, and when they came back they were that. And y'all didn't think to tell me this when I got hired? Would you have believed it? I guess not. There's a reason the pay is so good. What about the salt? The lights? Listen, I don't know all the rules, and she didn't either, but before this place was built, apparently there were a lot more disappearances. People would get off at this exit because they thought they saw a sign for food or gas, take a turn, and never be seen again. But now, people just stop here, right off the highway and right back on. But that means when the family gets hungry, they come here. Yeah? That's why you went straight to the back? Yeah, I needed to get started. And you turned off the light so no one stops while they're here? Yeah. What about the salt? He went quiet. You saw why. At that moment the door opened and a couple with a toddler entered. A real family. Oblivious. We stopped talking. I took their order and Brucius heated up the grill. There was nothing else to do. This happened a few weeks ago, but I'm still working there. Corporate gave us an extra bonus check when the incident was reported, which got me in a cheap hotel with a decent bed and shower for a little while. I'm still applying for jobs, but no one else has called me back for an interview. I'm alive because of Brucius, but he was just hired as a corrections officer at the prison and is leaving soon. I might delete this later, but I needed to share it with someone, where no one would know who I was or judge me. What do you think I should do? Selling your soul to the devil is not as straightforward as you think. I never believed in the devil until I met him at a coffee shop on a random Tuesday. It wasn't some dramatic crossroads encounter or a midnight summoning with candles and incantations. He was just sitting there at a corner table in grind coffee, wearing a perfectly ordinary navy suit that looked like it was about to burst because of his muscles and reading the Financial Times. The only thing that gave him away was how he knew my name when I'd never seen him before in my life. Marcus Chen, he said, looking up from his paper as I walked past his table. Rough couple of months, haven't they been? He grinned. I stopped dead. Do I know you? I asked, though something in my gut already knew the answer would complicate everything. He smiled, and his teeth were perfectly white. Too white. Please sit. I have a proposition that might interest you. He charmingly gestured in front of him. I should have walked away. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to keep moving, get my overpriced latte, and pretend this conversation never happened. Instead, I sat down, as if I didn't even have a say in it. I'm in the business of solving problems, he said, folding his newspaper with precise creases. And you, Marcus, have quite a few problems. He was not wrong at all. The foreclosure notice was burning a hole in my jacket pocket, and my credit cards had all been maxed out for weeks. Sarah had left me 3 months ago, taking our daughter Emma with her. My startup had collapsed spectacularly, leaving me with nothing but debt and a profound sense of failure. Who are you? I asked. Names have power, he said. Let's just say I'm someone who can help. Your house. You're about to lose it. Your daughter barely speaks to you. Your ex-wife thinks you're a failure. Your credit is destroyed. Your business partners won't return your calls. He leaned back in his chair. Am I getting warm? The accuracy of his assessment hit me like a physical blow. How do you? I trailed. He chuckled. Know all this? I make it my business to know. The question is, how badly do you want to fix it? I stared at him. He was probably in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair, kind eyes, and arms at the size of my head. He looked like someone's accountant, not whatever he was. What are you suggesting? A transaction? A very reasonable one, actually. You have something I want, and I have something you need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. I'm prepared to offer you $1 million. Cash, untraceable. Enough to save your house, win back your family, start over, he said. I couldn't resist the urge to sigh at his annoying corporate tone. In exchange for what? His smile widened. Just a small piece of your soul, nothing dramatic. Maybe 10%. You'll hardly notice it's gone. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. You're insane. Am I? He opened the portfolio and showed me photographs. Pictures of my house, my daughter's school, Sarah's apartment. Marcus, in 3 days, the bank will repossess your home. In 2 weeks, your daughter will start at a new school because Sarah can't afford the private one anymore. In a month, you'll be sleeping in your car. He closed the portfolio. I'm offering you a way out. You're talking about selling my soul to the devil. He smiled softly. I'm talking about a limited partnership arrangement. Think of it as spiritual equity financing. You retain majority ownership of your soul, 90%. I get a small stake in exchange for solving your immediate liquidity crisis. The business terminology made it sound almost reasonable. Almost. This is crazy, I said, but I didn't get up. Crazy would be letting your pride destroy your family. Crazy would be sleeping in your car while your daughter thinks her father is a loser who couldn't provide for her. He leaned forward. Marcus, I'm not asking for your firstborn or eternal damnation. 10%, that's all. Letting aside the fact that I was talking to the devil right now, I thought about Emma. About the look in her eyes the last time I'd seen her, when I couldn't afford to take her to the movies. About Sarah's voice when she'd called me pathetic. What exactly would happen to that 10%? Nothing dramatic. You might find yourself slightly more pragmatic in your business dealings, a little less concerned with certain moral complexities, if you know what I mean. He chuckled. Small changes, barely noticeable. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Finally, I asked, "How would this work?" He reached into his portfolio again and pulled out a contract. It looked like any other legal document. Dense text, whereas clauses, signatures lines. At the bottom it specified 10% of Party A's immortal soul in exchange for the sum of $1 million United States dollars, $1,000. "Just sign here," he said, producing an elegant fountain pen seemingly out of nowhere, "and initial here, acknowledging you understand the terms." My hand was shaking as I took the pen. This was insane. This was impossible. But the foreclosure notice in my pocket felt very real, and so did the image of Emma's disappointed face. I signed. The moment the pen left the paper, I felt different. Not dramatically different, but like I'd just had a very strong cup of coffee, more alert, more focused. The man across from me smiled, and the contract disappeared into his portfolio. "Pleasure doing business with you, Marcus." He stood up and extended his hand. When I shook it, his skin was surprisingly warm. "The money will be in your account by tomorrow morning. That's it?" "That's it. Though," he paused at the door, "you might find that other opportunities present themselves soon. When they do, you'll know how to reach me." He left, and I sat there staring at my coffee, wondering if I'd just had the most vivid hallucination of my life. The money was there the next morning. $1 million, just like he'd promised. Within 6 months, everything had changed. I'd saved the house, started a new company, and Sarah was actually taking my calls again. Emma was back in her good school, and I could afford the things that made her smile. The 10% I'd given up seemed like the bargain of the century. The changes were subtle, just like he'd said. I found myself cutting corners in ways that would have bothered me before. When a competitor's company was struggling, I bought them out for a fraction of their worth, knowing they were desperate. When a regulatory issue threatened my new business, I made certain donations to certain local politicians that cleared the way. Nothing illegal exactly, but nothing I would have done before either. I told myself it was just good business. Pragmatism. The world was harsh, and these were the kinds of decisions successful people made. The second meeting happened at a restaurant downtown. I was celebrating landing a major contract when he slid into the booth across from me, looking exactly the same as he had 8 months earlier. "Congratulations on the Henderson deal," he said. "Quite a coup." "Thanks." I tried to sound casual, but seeing him again made my stomach clench. "What brings you here?" "A complication, I'm afraid." "You see that Henderson contract? Your main competitor was about to land it. Had the inside track, actually. Better bid, better relationship with the client." I frowned. "But I won it fair and square." "You won it because certain information found its way to certain people, and certain pressure was applied in certain quarters. Information and pressure that, shall we say, originated from my resources. What are you saying?" "I'm saying that my 10% stake in your soul has been working quite hard on your behalf, harder than we originally contracted for." He smiled that too-white smile. "I'm going to need to renegotiate our arrangement." "No." The word came out more forcefully than I'd intended. "We had a deal. We did, and that deal has been exceeded. You see, Marcus, your success over the past few months hasn't been entirely your own doing. My investment has been quite active." He pulled out another contract. "I'm afraid I'm going to need another 15%. 15%? That would put you at 25% total." "Still a minority stake," he pointed out reasonably, "and frankly quite fair given the value I've added to your life." He grinned. Then he leaned back. "Of course, if you'd prefer, I could simply withdraw my support, see how well you do without it." The threat was implicit but clear. Everything I'd rebuilt could disappear. What happens if I say no? Well, the Henderson contract would fall through, for starters. Seems there might be some irregularities in the bidding process that could come to light. Your financing for the new company might encounter some unexpected obstacles. Sarah might start wondering where all this sudden success came from. He leaned back. "I'd hate to see you lose everything again." I stared at the contract. Another 15% seemed like a lot, but I'd still retain majority control. And losing everything now would be worse than losing it before. I had so much more to lose. I signed. This time the change was more noticeable. I found myself making decisions that would have horrified the man I'd been 2 years ago. When a small supplier couldn't deliver on time, I destroyed their business instead of just finding someone else. When an employee threatened to quit, I made sure she was blacklisted throughout the industry. I didn't even look at the eyes of beggars on the streets. These actions felt not just reasonable but necessary, even satisfying. I was changing. Sarah moved back in with me after a year. Emma called me Daddy again. My business was thriving. In the end, the 25% of my soul I'd given up seemed like a small price for everything I'd gained. The third meeting was at my office. He didn't make an appointment. I just looked up one day and he was sitting in the chair across from my desk. "We need to talk," he said. By now I knew the routine. Some new crisis that required his intervention, some justification for taking another piece of my soul. I was ready for him. "What's the problem this time?" "Your wife," he said simply. "Sarah, what about her?" "She's been asking questions about your sudden turnaround, about some of your business practices. She's suspicious." "Suspicious of what?" "She's hired a private investigator, Marcus. A very good one. He's been digging into your finances, your business dealings, your associates. Some of what he's finding is problematic." I felt cold. "What kind of problematic?" "The kind that leads to federal investigations. The kind that leads to prison time." He leaned forward. "The kind that leads to your daughter visiting you through bulletproof glass." His smile never seemed wider at that time. "You're lying." "Am I?" He pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the desk. Inside were photographs, documents, bank records, all the evidence of things I'd done, deals I'd made, corners I'd cut. Individually, they might have been explicable. Together, they painted a picture of systematic corruption. "This is all circumstantial," I said, but my voice was weak. "Perhaps. But it's enough to raise questions, enough to start an investigation that would unravel everything. Your business, your marriage, your relationship with Emma, everything." My hands shook. I was feeling fear. Proper fear for the first time in a long time. "What do you want?" I shook. 30% more, he said. "That would give me 55% total, a controlling interest. In exchange, all of this evidence disappears. The private investigator has an accident. Sarah's suspicions fade. Your life continues exactly as it is. 55%. That's more than half. It is. But consider the alternative." I looked at the photographs again, at the evidence of what I'd become. What we'd become, I corrected myself, because none of this had happened in a vacuum. Every decision had seemed reasonable at the time, necessary even. "If you have controlling interest, what does that mean for me?" "Oh, don't worry. Nothing will change. I will let you still have your free will. But you'll naturally find yourself more aligned with my interests, more efficient in your decision-making, less burdened by concerns that might interfere with success." I thought about Emma, about Sarah, about everything I'd built. I signed. The change this time was immediate and profound. It was like someone had adjusted the contrast on my moral vision. Things that had once seemed questionable now seemed obviously correct. Ethical considerations that had once nagged at me simply weren't there anymore. Good or bad didn't seem to cross my mind anymore. There were just success. I fired a dozen employees without cause because they were expensive. I foreclosed on 3 small businesses that owed me money, even though I knew it would destroy the families behind them. I manipulated stock prices and destroyed competitors with a systematic ruthlessness that was both alien to who I'd once been and utterly natural to who I was becoming. Sarah stopped asking questions. The private investigator's report was mysteriously lost. My business empire grew. But I was starting to understand that I wasn't driving anymore. I was just along for the ride. The 4th meeting was at Emma's school. I was watching her soccer game when he sat down next to me on the bleachers. "She's quite talented," he said, nodding toward my daughter. "Don't," I said immediately. I grew cold. Don't even think about bringing her into this. Relax, Marcus. I'm not here about Emma. I'm here about you. He pat my back. What now? You're dying, he said with a frown that didn't quite reach his jawline. The words hit me like a blow. What? Pancreatic cancer. Very aggressive. You probably have 6 months, maybe less. He said it as casually as he might comment on the weather. Of course, medicine has its limitations, but I don't. I stared at him, then at Emma running across the field. You're lying. He grabbed my waist and pulled me closer to him. The symptoms will start next week. You'll think it's just stress at first. By the time you see a doctor, it'll be too late for conventional treatment. He turned to face me. But not too late for unconventional treatment. Let me guess. You want more of my soul, 35% more. That would give me 90% total. In exchange, the cancer disappears. You live a long, healthy life. You get to watch Emma graduate, get married, have children of her own. I guarantee you. 90%, I repeated. That leaves me with 10%. Still enough to maintain your essential self, your memories, your love for your family, your core personality. You'll just be more focused, more efficient, less conflicted. And if I say no, you die, slowly and painfully. Emma watches her father waste away. Sarah becomes a widow. Your business empire crumbles without your leadership. Everyone that depends on you comes crumbling down. On the field, Emma scored a goal. She looked over at me and waved, her face bright with joy. I waved back, my hand feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Why? I asked. Why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything, Marcus. I'm simply offering solutions to your life full of problems. You're the one making the choices, but you're engineering the problems. Am I? I didn't give you cancer, Marcus. I didn't make you eat those donuts. I'm merely offering to cure it. I didn't make your wife suspicious. Your own actions did that. I offered to fix it. Every step of the way, you've had choices. You've simply chosen the path that led you here. He was right, and that was the most horrifying part. Every decision had been mine. Every signature on every contract had been voluntary. I had sold myself piece by piece. But watching Emma celebrate with her teammates, I knew I couldn't face dying, couldn't face leaving her. I signed the contract. This time the change was like stepping into a different person's skin. The last vestiges of my old moral framework simply vanished. I felt lighter, more focused, more certain of my purpose. The world became a clearer place, divided neatly between things that served my interests and things that didn't. I fired my brother from the company the next day because he was questioning my methods. I evicted a dozen families from properties I owned because they were behind on rent. I destroyed a charity that was interfering with one of my developments by exposing its director's personal secrets. The bonuses decreased, as with every employee's salary. None of it bothered me. It all felt perfectly reasonable. Sarah seemed happier too. She stopped asking uncomfortable questions and started enjoying the life my success had provided. Emma thrived in her expensive school, surrounded by luxury I could easily afford. I was successful, healthy, and wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I was also barely human. I was merely a brain, piloting a meat suit. The final meeting was inevitable. I'd been expecting it for months when he appeared in my home office on a quiet Sunday evening. Emma was upstairs doing homework. Sarah was reading in the living room. Everything was perfect. "Hello, Marcus." I didn't respond this time. "I'm here with good news. You've been such an exemplary partner that I'm prepared to offer you the deal of a lifetime." Now I looked up. Deal? Total buyout. I purchase your remaining 10%, and in exchange, I guarantee that Emma and Sarah will want for nothing for the rest of their lives. Emma will get into any college she wants. Sarah will be happy and prosperous. They'll both live long, successful lives. And me? You'll be exactly who you've been becoming. Successful, powerful, effective. You just won't be, you, anymore. I leaned back in my chair. It was strange how calm I felt about this moment I'd been dreading. What happens to my soul when you own 100% of it? It becomes mine, completely. Your body continues to function. Your mind continues to work. but the essential spark that made you Marcus Chen transfers to me. You become, in effect, an extension of my will. I become you. A part of me, yes. I thought about the man I'd been 3 years ago, desperate, failing, losing everything. That person seemed like a stranger now, someone weak and foolish who'd let silly moral constraints interfere with success. But that person had also been the one who'd loved Emma with pure, uncomplicated joy, who'd loved Sarah without calculation, who'd felt genuine remorse when he hurt people. What guarantee do I have that you'll keep your word about Emma and Sarah? None. But what choice do you have? He was right, of course. He'd been right every step of the way. I could refuse, but then what? I'd still be 90% his, still bound to his will in all but the smallest matters, and Emma and Sarah would face whatever future awaited them without his protection. If I sign this, will I still remember who I was? Oh yes, those memories are quite valuable. They help inform decision-making, provide emotional context for manipulating others. You'll remember Marcus Chen very clearly. You just won't be him anymore. I picked up the pen. It felt familiar in my hand now, like an old tool I'd grown comfortable using. One last question, I said. What's your name? Your real name? For the first time in our relationship, he looked genuinely pleased by something I'd asked. For some reason, his face looked oddly familiar now. You can call me Marcus, he said. That's who I'm going to be. I signed the contract. The change was instantaneous and total. I felt my sense of self, that essential, indefinable thing that had made me drain away like water from a broken cup. What remained was crystal clear purpose, perfect focus, and complete understanding of my role in a larger design. I am no longer Marcus Chen. I am something that wears Marcus Chen's face and speaks with Marcus Chen's voice and carries Marcus Chen's memories. I run Marcus Chen's business empire and live in Marcus Chen's house and kiss Marcus Chen's wife goodnight. Emma still calls me Daddy. Sarah still loves the man she thinks I am. They're both happy, prosperous, and protected, just as promised. And sometimes, late at night when they're both asleep, I remember what it felt like to be the man who loved them. I remember his hopes, his fears, his genuine desire to be good. I remember his weakness, his desperation, and his fatal inability to understand that every deal with me was exactly as straightforward as it seems. The devil told me his name, after all. And now, when desperate people find themselves at coffee shops and restaurants and school bleachers having conversations with a man in a well-tailored suit who knows their problems and has solutions to offer, they're talking to whatever left of Marcus. He offers them exactly what I offered him: reasonable terms, logical arguments, and the gradual purchase of their souls in convenient installments. Just like me, he's always completely honest about the transactions. Just like me, he never lies about the consequences. And just like me, he finds that desperate people will sell their souls piece by piece, convincing themselves each time that they're making a reasonable business decision right up until the moment there's nothing left to sell. It's exactly as straightforward as it seems. They just don't want to see it.
I think I saved my friend from getting trafficked.
Back in May 2024, I'd 32F recently been let go from a job due to company downsizing, but I was getting paid severance as well as had a good portion of money saved up in my retirement fund, so I was taking a small break before picking up another job. My best friend, 28F, had just inherited a car from her family back in California, and she wanted to fly back there to pick it up and drive it back New Orleans. She also missed home and wanted to spend around 2 weeks in Cali before driving back across the States for another 2 weeks, so we could take time to see some sights along the way, and since I was job-free and had never seen Cali before, she asked if I'd want to join her on the road trip, even offered to cover my plane ticket, hotel, Airbnb stays, and the gas, so all I'd have to pitch in with is my own food. I thought that was really overly generous, but she assured me that it literally wasn't going to put a dent on her funds, since she had a ton saved up and was well off. She just thought, for one, she'd feel safer going on a road trip with a trusted friend, plus it would be a fun friend trip for the both of us. So I agreed. As someone who was born and raised on the East Coast, I thought Cali was a huge change and pretty amazing. Loved the fresh air and the lack of intense humidity, After collecting the car, we started driving east through Nevada, then Utah, then ended up in Wyoming. Right after crossing the Wyoming border, we stopped for gas and some snacks. We weren't hungry enough to stop into the diner next to the gas station. My friend loves photography, though, and wanted to pull up to the Wyoming Welcome Center across the street to take a picture of the surrounding cliffs and the railroad that was cutting through the lower canyon. Let me paint you the picture. Aside from the small gas station and diner across the street and the little Welcome Center across from them with the Welcome to Wyoming sign, this area was pretty empty. It was only us parked at the Welcome Center and about 2 cars parked at the diner across the street. While my friend went to snap pictures of the canyon and railroad, I stayed in the car to lounge because I wasn't feeling great. I get hit with vertigo spells and migraines and was trying to rest it off. But out of nowhere, this guy saunters up behind her. Didn't call out when approaching her to alert her of his presence. Only said something when she whipped around and saw him. Even though I was reclined in the passenger seat of the car, I sat up immediately. I couldn't hear what the guy was saying to her, and she was just responding as calmly as possible to what he said, but made a slight hand signal to me in the car. I grabbed the keys out of the ignition because it was the only weapon I had available and got out of the car. Plus, I didn't want to risk him bolting for the car and driving off with it. When I got out of the car, the guy looked surprised to see me there and his entire demeanor seemed to grow shifty. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, direct but casual. He said he was just wondering if she could help him take a picture of him with his phone by the Welcome to Wyoming sign by the road. Now, my friend or I could have said, "Nah, sorry," but you really never know how someone is going to react to being told no. He had a hand in his pocket and I really couldn't tell if he was holding a weapon out of sight or not. As crazy as it seems, we agreed to help him out. While she played nice girl and chatted with him on the way to the sign, I followed closely behind them both to watch him. The entire way towards the sign, the guy kept faltering in his steps like he was trying to slow down enough until we were ahead of him, but I didn't allow that. I would just stop and wait until he kept walking. He never looked back at me, but he was acting tense and fidgety. I had the car keys between my fingers, just in case I might have to jab him if he lashed out at a moment's notice. I also glanced at the diner across the street to make sure we stayed in view of it, though one never knows if people will actually assist or if they'll just go into bystander mode, so I had to stay alert. After all, if anything happened, it wasn't like law enforcement would appear out of thin air to resolve an issue. The entire time we walked towards the welcome billboard, I listened to their conversation as well. The guy claimed he was in the States on a business trip with his co-workers. Said he was from Brazil, but he sounded Slavic. Not saying you can't be Slavic and live in Brazil, just giving the details I noticed. He had a slight tan, very short dark hair, and a lean build, maybe 5'10", 6 feet. My friend and I are about 5'5", 5'6", but I'm more built muscle-wise. I've been told I look a little intimidating for a woman, which perhaps was a good thing in this situation. My friend asked where his co-workers were, and he claimed they were at the diner across the street. Yet he hadn't parked his car there, which I thought was odd. His car was parked closest to the road of the Welcome Center. My vertigo and headache were completely forgotten because I was running on pure adrenaline. Everything was happening in slow motion, and my mind was racing with every possible scenario that could happen so I could mentally prepare myself for what could happen next. When we got to the billboard, he gave my friend his phone and she took his picture in front of the billboard twice. When he came back to look at the photos and was like, "These are good, nice, thanks so much." He then kept rambling and asking how we liked America and if we'd ever traveled outside the country before. I was becoming even more uneasy because we were still just standing there by the road, and I kept glancing to see if any cars were coming. I swear we stood there for like 5 whole minutes before he finally started walking back to his car. In a very slow shuffle, I might add. It was like he was purposefully stalling and once again kept trying to get behind me. No dice. While his back was turned, I bent to stuff some gravel and sand into my pocket. I wanted every possible weapon at my disposal. We walked a little more and I bent down again while he wasn't looking to pick up a fist rock and just hid it slightly behind me so he couldn't see it. My mind was already preparing to rationalize beating this guy's skull in if I had to. When we got to the parking lot, my friend and I stopped and he finally looked back and stopped before glancing back to his car and then at us. He starts rambling again and making more conversation. He didn't urge us to go back to his car, but he was once again stalling. Literally, he'd finish a topic, go quiet for a couple of seconds, and then ask us another question or bring up another topic to keep us talking. This went on for another 5 minutes, and then I finally said, "Well, we better get back on the road. We're expected." And he looked a little uneasy before finally saying, "Oh, well, okay, thanks for the help. Goodbye." And he turned to walk very briskly to his car. My friend almost headed right for our car, but I stopped her and said, "Wait, I want to make sure he drives off first. Remember, he said his coworkers were at the diner across the street, plus I didn't want to run the risk of us getting in our car and being followed." This guy sat in his car for a few minutes, and my friend and I pretended we were talking just in case he was watching us, and then finally he drove off. We stayed there until we couldn't see his car anymore. Then we went back to our car. Both of us were shaking. Sometimes you just know something is off. My friend said she felt like the guy was going to try and traffic her and said, "I'm so glad I brought you with me on this trip, 'cause holy shit. You looked like a German shepherd when you sat up in the car when I signaled you." I've never really been in a fight in my life. I've been lucky enough that I've never really had to. I've had close calls, but have always managed to de-escalate a situation before it got physical, and perhaps this was yet another one of those times. But I had never been more prepared to kill someone if it meant my friend and I could get out of there with our lives intact. I mentally prepared myself to do the unthinkable. Even imagined tossing that guy off the cliff if I had to. It was pretty scary. Needless to say, we both bought ourselves some mace at the next stop. Didn't run into any further problems in our trip, but I'll never forget all the details that happened with that encounter. Something was just off about the way that guy was acting towards us. Who knows? Maybe he was scared of us or me after I stepped out of the car and thought we were about to Thelma Louise his ass, and that's fine by me. I'd rather a man think twice out of fear before preying on a woman. All of that being said, you go on a road trip. Try to have someone with you if possible and stay alert when you stop anywhere. Keep aware of your surroundings. Keep an eye on the threat. Be prepared to use anything you can at your disposal. There is a reason why you should not burn witches. Let me preface by saying I have always been very honest about what I was. I've never had any shame with what I am, with what my mother was, my grandmother, and a long line of women stretching back to the seeming beginning of time. I am a witch. I have always practiced, I have always had power, and not once have I ever harmed another living being. Not ever, despite what anyone might say. Several years ago, I saw a shirt a young lady was wearing on a rare trip to town. It said, "I am the descendant of the witches you forgot to burn." That shirt made me laugh. I ended up buying one off the internet at the public library. I don't have the internet at home, you see. I have been a self-imposed hermit for decades now. It's for the best. I made a choice, and I have to stick with it. Back in the 70s, when I was still relatively young, something dark came to our town. Even I couldn't ascertain where it had come from. Not even my mother or my grandmother or any member of our small coven could understand its origin. Regardless of where it had come here. We first became aware of this dark thing when the first child went missing. The little boy turned up later, dead and drained and emaciated like a dried cicada husk. We were blamed first because of course we were. If there was anything from rain to snow to someone with a bad case of acne, everyone in our town pointed a finger at us. Some did it in jest, some in habit, and some in outright and malicious hatred. Edith had been the first once to sense the thing. I still remember that evening. We had met for tea, no witchy business at all. It had been a delightful afternoon tea, when the poor lady had clutched her pearls and gasped like she'd seen a mouse. "Are you all right, Edith? Tea too hot?" my mother had asked softly. But I knew she suspected that was not the case, not with the way her eyes narrowed as she looked at the middle-aged woman. "No, dear heavens, something has come to our town." I felt it pass through like a cold wind down my spine, something wicked. Tears were in her eyes as she spoke. My mother nodded and poured out her tea, reading her tea leaves while the rest of us looked on in anticipation. Her face was grim as she read what the bits of waterlogged tea leaves had to say. "My dear ladies, we have work to do," my mother said, standing, wiping her hands on her apron as she stood, and we got to work. Day and night, each of us using our particular talents to not only track the thing, but find a way to contain it. Constance read her ancient tomes and texts. Mary tracked the beast to its lair using her divination skills. My mother and grandmother had their spells and potions, and I helped. My skills were in dreams and their interpretation. I spent many days fast asleep in medicine-induced stupor to glean what I could about this interloper. All I could learn was that it was ancient. Perhaps at one point it was worshipped. It had been summoned by those with less skill to do their bidding. Instead, it had killed its would-be jailers and fled into the world, finding victims and blood where it could. Do you have a name, Gretchen? Without a name to bind it, our prison will not be as effective. My mother asked me, her voice filled with concern and anger, though thankfully that anger was not directed at me. No mother, no name. It has many names, and the dreams have not revealed its true name to me, I said softly. No matter, the magic and bindings will hold, though we ourselves will be bound to it until our deaths, my grandmother explained. Her voice was old and strained after so many weeks of working magic. She seemed as frail as paper and as thin. And what about after our deaths, Elizabeth? What then? Mary asked, her voice sharp and worn thin of patience. Then it shall be free, unless we can learn its true name and banish it from whence it came, my grandmother said with a tiny shrug. A price we must pay to contain it. It's been killing children, and it will not stop until it has gone through every innocent life in the town, Edith said, teary-eyed. We lay our trap. It was easy. I was the willing bait for the thing. I was the youngest, and mother and grandmother had filled me with potions and tinctures to make me more appetizing to the thing. We lured it to a small cave located on our property. We needed somewhere private where prying eyes would not see us, and more importantly, not disturb the thing once it was captured. It came quickly, on its shadowed feet. It took no effort to hide itself. It was darkness itself. No prey escaped it once it had its eyes set upon it. By this time, over a dozen children and young women had been killed. More blame was laid at our feet. We were being threatened to our faces. Dead animals were being thrown into our yards. Bricks with threats written on them were tossed through windows. When I felt the thing's presence at my back, it took all. the strength I had to not run. Our magic was strong, and unbeknownst to the thing, it was already trapped. I could feel the panic set in when realized it could not leave the cave. Whispered threats were uttered as it reached for me and found it could not grasp me. It writhed, it screamed and begged, and it promised all manner of worldly goods and powers if it would let us go. We ignored it. We all took turns sealing the small cave with bricks and mortar. No easy task to do in the forest on unsteady ground, but we managed. When the final brick was laid, our powers were tied to its containment, to its life and hopefully eventually death. As long as one of us lived, it would be locked behind its prison of earth and brick. But then we started to die, one by one, as old age claimed us. My grandmother first, followed by my mother. Constance drowned on a trip to Florida. Edith and Mary lived to be in their 90s, but the Grim Reaper comes for everyone in the end. I am the last. I am in my 80s. I have never married or had children, though it was not for lack of trying. The rumors that it had been me and my coven who had killed those innocents all those years ago never went away. They only grew. And no man wanted me. I have been friendless now for many years now. I have tried to find out the true name of the thing, but to no avail. I have looked in books, I have scoured the internet, and found nothing. I have reached out to other supposed witches and been met with scammers and liars. I feel so alone, and now I am dying. The last few years the harassment has gotten so much worse. I have not been able to safely leave my home, as when I do I am followed and stalked. I've been threatened with death, and today it seems like they have made good on their threats. My home is on fire. The flames are creeping along my hallway, and I can see the light from the fire getting brighter. And there is smoke, so much smoke. Outside my window I hear them screaming. Screaming the same thing people like them have screamed for centuries. Burn the witch! Burn the witch! I have fallen to the floor and I'm coughing. And I am afraid. Afraid for myself and the others. There are many innocent people that live in this town now. I can feel the thing stirring now. I can feel its anticipation. Once I die, it will be free, and the bricks have already begun to fall away. As the flames finally reach my door, I feel pity. I have no illusions about the pain and fear this creature will unleash on the people of this town, and they are about to learn a very important lesson, one that will be written in the blood of their children. There is a reason why you shouldn't burn witches. My wife stepped on something in the lake. The next day they found a body. A few years ago, when my daughter was a toddler, my wife and I used to take her to a nearby lake to picnic, swim, and just unwind. It was a peaceful spot, quiet, not too crowded, the kind of place where you could easily forget about the world for a while. One afternoon, after we'd finished eating, my wife decided to go for a quick swim while I stayed on the beach with our daughter. I watched her wade out into the water, the sun sparkling off the surface. A minute later, she suddenly stopped and turned to me, shouting something. At first, I couldn't make out what she said, but her expression was off. Then I heard her clearly. "I think I just stepped on someone's face." I froze for a second, thinking maybe she was joking, but the look on her face wasn't playful. It was pale, almost terrified. She quickly started making her way back to the shore, her legs moving faster, like she couldn't get out of the water fast enough. When she got back to me, she was visibly shaken. She said that while she was swimming, her foot brushed against something soft, and at first she thought it was a rock or a weird patch of seaweed. But when she pressed her foot down, she felt the unmistakable shape of a face beneath the water, a nose, an eye socket. She swore she felt the hollow of the eye. I considered going in to check it out, but something stopped me. The unease in my gut, maybe. We decided to pack up and leave right after that. The next day, the local news reported that a young boy who had been missing for days was found drowned in that same lake, not far from where we had been. He'd been there the whole time, just beneath the surface. To this day, my wife is convinced she stepped on his face. Creepiest experience I had living with my folks. Back in 2018 or 2019, I was hanging out with a friend one evening. Around 6:30, I decided to head home. It was that time of year when it gets pitch black early, the kind of darkness that makes a scary story even creepier. The drive only took about 10 or 15 minutes, and when I pulled into the driveway, I realized I was alone. My parents were either out to dinner or out of town. I can't remember which. But the point is, the house was completely mine for the night. When you walk into my house, you step right into the living room. To the right is the kitchen, and to the left there's a hallway that leads to a spare bedroom, the bathroom, and finally my room. The house was dark, but I didn't bother turning on the lights since it's a straight path to my room. As I started walking down the hallway, I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw half a face and a shoulder peeking out from my bathroom doorway. The instant I focused on it, the figure slipped back inside. My first reaction, looking back, probably not the smartest, was to rush straight into the bathroom. I flicked on the light, heart pounding, but the room was empty. Nobody there, nothing at all. I'd experienced odd things before, little moments that felt paranormal, but never this clear, never this real. To this day, that's still the most intense and unforgettable experience I've ever had with the unexplained.